All right, so this video now is going to look at section 6 of the ethics application form, anonymity and confidentiality. So just noting the first little blurb there about the difference in the definition of anonymity versus confidentiality. We've included this because sometimes it is the terms are used interchangeably and they really aren't, and that has some real significant implications for the ethical protocols that you have in place. And so anonymity, as it says here, is really in those situations where the researcher has absolutely no way of knowing and no way to identify a particular participant and or link their particular person's to their data that they've submitted for the study. So the researcher has absolutely no idea, who the participants are and what data is theirs. So the most obvious example of this would be an anonymous online survey where you're collecting absolutely no personally identifying information. That would be an anonymous survey, and you're able to guarantee anonymity. In other cases, you may have your data may be anonymous, and you're able to guarantee your participants remain anonymous if you're working with data that maybe you didn't collect, you got it from another researcher, and the data has been stripped of any identifying information. So all the data is coded, for example, and you don't have access to the codes for that data. So that is anonymity. Confidentiality is where you do know who the participants are, and that is often in the case, that is always the case when you do an interview or a focus group, you have to know who the participants are because you've had to be in contact with them in order to set up the timing and for the interview or the focus group. And so you know their identity, but in the case of research, you often then will promise to keep their identity confidential. So you'll take some steps to de-identify their data. Often that involves giving the participants a pseudonym, or in the case of kind of large-scale data sets, giving each participant a number code for to attach to their data. So that's sort of the difference there. So we are looking for you to use the correct term as it pertains to your study here. And given that, so we want you in this first box here to describe the procedures that you're going to use to ensure either anonymity or confidentiality, both during the research process and the data analysis, and definitely in the release of findings. So when you're disseminating your research. Now, you see here there's a little footnote under the box, and that is going back to previous information that you provided in this form. If you're using an online, survey tool, for example, and you're using a server that has servers not in Canada, that is something that affects the promise of confidentiality. If so, for example, you're using, say, SurveyMonkey, and SurveyMonkey, in that survey, you're asking people to include their contact information because, say, you either want to give them an incentive or you want to follow up with them, so they give you name, email, that sort of thing. If that data if all that is being stored along with their responses to your survey being stored on non-Canadian servers, then you have to take some special steps to ensure that confidentiality of that particular data there. And so describe the procedures to ensure that anonymity, confidentiality. If there's any exceptions to confidentiality, describe how you will get consent, but also try and minimize those risks of guaranteeing or protecting confidentiality. So situations where this might apply would be if you are doing qualitative interviews with persons persons from a very small, population or particular group, and to which, even though you don't, for example, interview or involve all people within that group, the group is so small, and given maybe some other participant characteristics, one particular participant could potentially be identifiable by someone who's looking at your description of the research and results and data and that sort of thing. So one example might be, and I'm going to use an institutional example here, would be, say you are doing a study involving nursing students at Red Deer Polytechnic. And part of the research, say you're doing interviews and that sort of thing, and you are collecting, and because it's part of your research question, collecting some demographic details of each participant. And when you present your study, you're using quotes or opinions and that sort of thing from particular participant, and including some of that demographic details because it's statistically significant and important to whatever you're looking at. So for example, you're using quotes and discussion from students, and you're identifying them as either male or female. Now, if your group is, as I said, nursing student at RDP, we do know that is a group of students that is predominantly one gender, that is predominantly female identifying student. And so that if you do have a male student in your sample, in your participant group, that could potentially, lead to someone else outside the study seeing that and suspecting that, that particular student is that participant in your study. So it's in those sorts of situations where you need to, clearly lay out the risks to that and what you'll do to try and, put up maybe some extra protections around that. One suggestion in that particular case I just mentioned, and anything that is related to this, one suggestion could be that you share with the participants drafts of your presentation or publications or papers before you go live with it, and to give them to have them look at it and perhaps even reconsent to how they are being depicted and how they're being discussed, how their words are being framed, and making sure that they're comfortable with the fact that they potentially are not identifiable given what you've done to ensure that. So that would be kind of one measure that you could put into place in there. It's just one. There are several others, but that's just a quick and easy example there. The last section here is if the data you're using is coming from existing sources or previously collected data, you need to be aware of, and then here communicate that about what were some of the guarantees about confidentiality or anonymity that was given to those participants and those persons for whom that data is that you are now using. So this is in cases where you didn't collect the original data, but the original researcher did have to go through an informed consent process and had to discuss with their participants anonymity and confidentiality, and so you need to sort of outline that. And what we're looking for here is that the data that you have access to is either completely anonymous or anonymized, and if it is not, what sort of steps are you going to take to ensure that continued guarantees of confidentiality if there are still some personally identifying information tagged onto that data. All right, that's the confidentiality and anonymity section.